In this life, I have not a single regret, besides playing Taxan games. It's NES Works, episode 118.
Oh, hi there. We've got a terrific show lined up for you.
Taxan? More like taxing. Yeah, Naxat Soft's American branch made their NES debut back in January of 1989. And here, by April of '89, they've already worn out their welcome. This has to be the worst NES speedrun imaginable. From zero to go away in the space of 3 months. And it's all their own fault for releasing so many mediocre games in quick succession. I suppose the good news is that Nintendo took their publishing quotas seriously. Taxan has churned out a bunch of games already in 1989, so we won't be seeing them again until 1990, where they thankfully will have regrouped and teamed up with developer Kid to make games actually worth playing. Here though, say what you will about Nintendo's draconian publishing policies, they did at least keep the worst impulses of certain publishers in check. Imagine Taxan, unfettered, just churning out material like these two games every single month. The mind reels, the eyes weep. Thankfully, Fist of the North Star and Mystery Quest wrap up the Taxan 89 Tour of Pain, with two games that resemble much worse versions of games we've already seen here on this channel. Given that the company started its relationship with the NES by publishing the Famicom mega hit Star Soldier, I feel like the guiding impulse behind their selections amounted to a game of follow the leader. With Star Soldier, you had a massive success in Japan that the company clearly hoped would translate into NES sales, although I don't think it did. And with Fist of the North Star, I have to assume that they saw the popularity of the media property back home in Japan and hoped it too would translate into major sales in America. And to be fair, you can't blame them for hoping. Their localization of Fist of the North Star for NES put them right at the cutting edge of the emerging Japanese to English media trend that would grow in volume throughout the 90s. 1989 puts them about 10 years too early to really enjoy the fruits of those efforts, but there are worse legacies than helping to pave the way for the future. A decade on from Fist of the North Star's debut on NES, anime and manga would be firm fixtures of the American comic shop, and Viz Media's translation of the Fist of the North Star comic series helped make that happen. Fist has the distinction of being the second game based on a manga property to reach the US with its original license intact, following on the heels of Golgo 13 Top Secret Episode. Another Viz publication ambitiously presented to NES fans with the hope that they would embrace a popular, long-running, and incredibly violent foreign comic that had almost zero visibility in the US to that point. Sega didn't even bother back in 1986 when they localized an older Fist of the North Star game to Master System. They just renamed it Black Belt, gave it a visual overhaul that had nothing to do with Kenshiro's brutal journey through post-apocalyptic Japan, and let it live its own life. Taxan, on the other hand, tied it to Viz's brief attempt to publish Fist of the North Star in English as a series of monthly comics. This effort lasted a whopping 8 months before stalling out, until eventually resuming again in 1995. Not a great omen for Taxan, whose media tie-in became more of an anchor around their collective neck than a compelling mass-market sales pitch. But really, the whole idea of localizing Fist of the North Star, or for that matter Golgo 13, into the American NES market comes off as bizarrely disconnected from the realities of the comics and games industries as they stood in 1989. The NES had firmly established itself as the console of choice for tweens and young teens, whereas Viz's Fist of the North Star endeavor aimed at an older audience. That's not simply a side effect of the violence inherent in the property either. On the contrary, the violent and mature nature of early American manga localizations, think Akira, Mai the Psychic Girl, Area 88, and Crying Freeman, reflected the fact that publishers like Viz, Eclipse, and Epic had their sights set firmly on indie comics enthusiasts. The American indie comics scene had been a vibrant element of the country's counterculture since the 1960s, though it had shifted more into mainstream awareness in the 1980s thanks to breakout works like Cerebus, ElfQuest, and most of all, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Well, perhaps vibrant isn't the best choice of words here. After all, independent comics largely consisted of black and white publications, since their small print runs made 4-color process prohibitively expensive. And it's not a coincidence that the underground comics of the 60s and 70s took off once zero graphic copies became readily accessible. Early US manga localizations followed in this tradition, with an emphasis on graphic violence and sexual material. Americans didn't see much in the way of comedy or other lighthearted localized fare until the 90s, and the rare early exceptions to that rule, such as Lam Ruse Yatsura, tended to be fairly bawdy in tone, aimed at older teens and young adults. So you can see the strange disconnect involved in a game like Fist of the North Star. Which isn't to say that kids didn't buy or play it, just that the main sales angle, based on the hit comic, didn't really work when it came to the core NES market. Even if NES kids knew where to find Fist of the North Star comics, their parents would have had a fit when they saw Kenshiro bloodily explode his first opponent's skull into giblets. And, to their credit, developers Bears Inc. and Shoei System did manage to incorporate all of that ruthless violence into their interpretation of what appears to be the saga's latter half. I say appears because, one, there's barely any story to be found in the game, and I'm just going by the fact that the final boss is listed as Shura. None of the narrative that drives the manga or anime made its way into the game, including crucial supporting characters like Rin, Yuria, or Bat. And two, Fist of the North Star was actually Hokuto no Ken 2 on Famicom, a follow-up to a 1986 release by the same developer to cover the manga up through Kenshiro's iconic confrontation with Rao. But it's hard to feel too invested here, since both games consist almost entirely of Kenshiro punching and kicking his way through hordes of identical mooks who inhabit visually uninteresting environments. By and large, this game just plays like a vastly worse version of Black Belt for Master System. It even incorporates secret boss tactics that you'd only think to try if you had seen those encounters in the source material. Though, to the NES game's credit, it doesn't require you to perform these specific moves in order to win, the way Sega's game did on Mark III. Still, this really does play like Black Belt, but crappier. It's critically hindered by its combination of source material and genre. This being a belt scroller, Kenshiro simply walks forward while punching and kicking, and theoretically using special attacks that I could never pull off. But there's no real room for variety in terms of enemy encounters. Canonically, Ken never has any particular trouble with the low-tier rabble. A single blow will detonate them, or send them flying off the screen in the case of kicks. Only Kenshiro's punches will cause an enemy to pulsate in agony for a split second before exploding into garbled sprite fragments. Whatever this game's failings, at least it sticks to canon. And I do have to give some grudging respect to the fact that it attempts to add some complexity to its stage layouts over black belts. While some levels do consist entirely of walking left or right, interior spaces incorporate multiple floors or interconnected rooms. Fist of the North Star doesn't do a particularly good or interesting job of any of this, admittedly, but it does at least try. The featureless spaces don't offer much in the way of landmarks, and objectives never grow more complex than find and kill a mini-boss, then find and kill the main boss. Rather than creating a difficulty curve with smarter, more interesting foes, Fist of the North Star resorts to simply throwing more crap at players with less time to react. By the fifth stage, the enemies mostly consist of dudes who go sliding across the floor at top speeds without warning, almost too fast for you to react to, while guys who chuck streams of projectiles keep you pinned down and unable to avoid the sliders. You don't really have a lot of tactical options for completing this game besides memorizing every enemy location and learning to exploit Kenshiro's weird attack hitboxes and sloppy jumping mechanics. It's funny because despite having been developed by a completely different studio than Golgo 13 Top Secret Episode, Kenshiro's lanky sprite, awkward gameplay, and bizarre floaty jump really call to mind that game. But Fist of the North Star lacks even a fraction of Top Secret Episode's mad ambition. You won't find any alternate gameplay modes here, any freeform city hubs, or even a single crucial NPC interaction. Top Secret Episode attempted to create an entirely new Golgo 13 story from whole cloth, while mimicking the beats and structure of a typical installment of the manga series. Fist of the North Star simply adapts the existing manga into the most simplistic interpretation possible, a shallow belt scroller that jettisons the narrative elements which justify Kenshiro's murderous march into the Shura Empire. I suppose if it played better, that slightness might not matter. But Taxan delivered a train wreck of a game, one of the worst yet seen on NES. A game that actually deserves the fully terrible reputation that gamers seem to reserve for earnestly ambitious media adaptations like Friday the 13th. sadly, Taxan's next, and mercifully final release for 1989 didn't fare any better. Mystery Quest deserves distinction in history only for being the one game ever to ask, what if Milon's secret castle were bad? Not that Milon's secret castle was particularly amazing by any means, but it plays like an absolute masterpiece compared to this virtual dog's breakfast. And I do mean dog, literally. In Japan, Mystery Quest shipped as a Famicom Disk System release under Squaresoft's Disk Original Group label, or DOG for short. And like pretty much all DOG releases, it was not especially good or interesting. In fact, the story goes that if not for the success of Final Fantasy, DOG would have been the end of Squaresoft. Maybe, maybe not. But playing Mystery Quest will certainly give you cause to believe those claims. However, Square doesn't actually factor into this NES release. Disk Original Group existed as Square's answer to Enix, a label that produced nothing of its own, but rather simply ushered other developers' games into existence. The actual talent behind Mystery Quest, for a certain value of the word talent, was an obscure studio called Carey Lab. You know, Carey Lab, the creator of beloved classics like Zelda and Zelda 2.
Wow!
Prior to the May 1987 Disk System debut of Mystery Quest in Japan, Carey Lab had never actually created a console game, working instead with home computers like MSX and FM7. It shows. Mystery Quest plays awkwardly and lacks a lot of the niceties you would expect to find in a console action game. It has a very mundane structure, uninteresting platforming design, and gameplay objectives that require tons of tedious trial and error. You can also, from what I can tell, get yourself stuck beyond a soft lock point of no return if you take on certain objectives out of order. So, really great stuff all around. In this game you play as a kid named Hao, who walks left to right shooting little bubbles at things. You can collect objects to earn points, and you can gather a variety of power-ups, but points seem to have no real purpose, and many power-ups disappear when you die and continue. Hao can jump on springs to leap extra high, and when he fires upward, his bubbles fly in a sort of scattered spray. Note that his shots can break certain blocks too. Like I said, this game wants to be Milon's secret castle in an uncomfortable way. Some of the power-ups you can collect confer permanent boosts onto Hao, giving him the ability to shoot more powerful bubbles that can shatter stronger blocks. Not that you have any visual indication to clue you in to which blocks those might be. Carey Lab seriously learned all the wrong lessons from Milon and just absolutely ran with them. Weirdly, Mystery Quest shares a feature in common with a contemporary sibling from Taxan, Mappy Land. You have to beat this game 4 times in order to see the true ending. This is a technique known as padding. In the Japanese release Hao's Mystery Quest, you needed to complete 4 distinct castles, but that version shipped on capacious Disk System media. To save money, Taxan shipped the NES version on a low-cost ROM that lacked the storage space of a disc, and they removed half the castles found in the Japanese game. In this case, that almost seems like a mercy. More Mystery Quest content sounds like a threat, not a promise. And in any case, simply completing the NES game as it exists is no easy task, not because it's challenging or interesting, it's just a tedious exercise in shooting or smashing every wall tile you see inside of the game's castles until you find the ones that break and open the path forward or reveal a crucial item. Like Fist of the North Star, Mappy Land, and Star Soldier, Mystery Quest reaches way back into Famicom's past and feels badly dated here on NES in 1989. At least Star Soldier and Mappy Land had a few things going for them and are still pretty fun. Mystery Quest is just a tragic misstep. The real mystery is, why did they localize this? What did Nintendo Power have to say? Well, Fist of the North Star got a single paragraph Packwatch entry in issue 6. And Mystery Quest, well, you know how Nintendo Power only like to say positive things about games? Clearly, their editors held to the belief that if you can't say something nice, you shouldn't say anything at all. Next time on NES Works, thankfully, not every game about shooting every brick in sight is actually bad.